So we begin today, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, Hanu Masechta Rosh Hashanah, which will address, of course, the Yontiv of Rosh Hashanah. But actually, there's other things that are discussed in this Masechta. It starts with Arba Rosh Hashanah Meim, and it'll go into many subjects that relate to the Arba Rosh Hashanah. And a big theme in this Masechta, towards the beginning, part of the first Perek and the second Perek, is the subject of Kiddush HaChodesh. How do you sanctify the new month? And then after that it comes to the halachas of Rosh Hashanah itself. So as far as the name of the Masechta, Rosh Hashanah, just to mention the famous vart that Alter Rebbe says, B'negei to Rosh Hashanah, that the name of Rosh Hashanah is not Tchilas Hashanah, that it's the beginning of the year, but it's called Rosh Hashanah, because the word Rosh means a head, just like the head includes in it the chayis klali that then comes out and is divided and separated into the evarim and the limbs and the organs of the body. So too, when we speak about a Rosh Hashanah, it's not just the first day of a new beginning of a year, but it really is the head that includes in it the chayis, the energy that comes afterwards into all the days of the year. That's the concept of a Rosh Hashanah. So, l'chayre, as we'll see here, there's more than one Rosh Hashanah. This concept is also true regarding the other Rosh Hashanahs that the Mishnah mentions here. Zakt Eilige Mishnah, Arba Rosh Hashanah Mei. There are 4 Rosh Hashanahs in the year. Be'echad b'Nissen, on the first day of Nissen, Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim. This is the Rosh Hashanah for kings. We'll see in the Gemara this refers to Yiddish kings. So, as Rashi here explains, and we'll see soon in the Gemara, when they would write Ashtar, a document, and they would write, let's say, that Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, so they would write the date. What was the date? The date they used was, let's say, the 3rd year of this and this king. Okay, so what determines the year? When does the year begin for this king? The year does not begin when this king was appointed as a king. If he was appointed, let's say, on Dalet Cheshvan, that's not when you count his year. You count his year starting from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So if he was appointed as a king in Adar, when it comes to Nisan, so you begin writing in the documents, it's the 2nd year of the king. That's what Rosh Hashanah l'Malachim means. V'l'regalim, and Rosh Chodesh Nisan is also the Rosh Hashanah for the Yomim Tovim, which the Gemara will explain what that means. What is this negeya that it's the Yom Tov, that it's the Rosh Hashanah for the Yomim Tovim. Be'echad be'elul, on the first day of Elul, Rosh Hashanah l'Maiser Behemah. It's the Rosh Hashanah for Maiser Behemah. What is Maiser Behemah? So Rashi says that Maiser Behemah, when you have to give the 10th of the Behemah for Maiser, so the halacha is, that's learned from the pasuk that Rashi here brings, that it has to be shana shana. You can't separate the Maiser Behemah from a flock of animals that has part of the animals from one year and part of the animals are from another year. It has to all be the animals of one year. So if you had 5 animals from one year and then you took 5 animals from the next year and you put them together, you can't give Maiser Behemah that way. So where is the year beginning from Maiser Behemah? From Rosh Chodesh Elul. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon Imrim, they argue on this and they say, Bechad b'Tishrei. When it comes to Maiser Behemah, the cutoff for the year for Maiser Behemah is just like the regular Rosh Hashanah, which is Echad b'Tishrei. The 3rd Rosh Hashanah was Echad b'Tishrei. The first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim. It's Rosh Hashanah for the years, which the Gemara will explain what that means. What's the relevance of years? V'Lishmitten, that's the Rosh Hashanah for Shemitah and Yovlis. Shemitah and Yovel starts from Aleph Tishrei, from the Rosh Hashanah of the year. This year, when the year is Shemitah. So from Aleph Tishrei, you're not allowed to work in the field anymore. L'Netiyah, Rosh Hashanah is for the Rosh Hashanah of Aleph Tishrei is also for Netiyah. This refers to a sapling. When you have a new tree that grows, there's a halacha of Arla that for 3 years you're not allowed to use this. You're not allowed to use this tree at all. And you're not allowed to have a hana from this tree, right? So when does the Rosh Hashanah begin from? The Rosh Hashanah begins also from Aleph Tishrei. So Rashi says, for example, if you planted your tree in Chodesh Av, and now just 2 months later it's Rosh Hashanah, so that's already considered to be a 2nd year. So you don't have to wait full 3 years. Weiter sagt the Mishnah, the Aleph Tishrei is also the Rosh Hashanah for vegetables. When it comes to giving maasros from vegetables, like I said before regarding Maiser Behemah, So when it comes to vegetables as well, you can't give maasros from the vegetables that grew one year for the vegetables of another year. So by vegetables, as Rashi says, it goes according to when you gather the vegetables. That's when it's chayiv, and that's when you determine the year of the maasros. So if you gathered vegetables before Rosh Hashanah and vegetables after Rosh Hashanah, it's different years, and that's also Aleph Tishrei. Be'echad b'Shvat, and then there's the Rosh Hashanah of Echad b'Shvat. The first day, the Rosh Chodesh Shvat, is Rosh Hashanah le'Ilan. That's Rosh Hashanah for the trees, which is again relevant for the same halacha of maasros. You can't give maasros from one year of the trees to another year of the trees. However, Rashi points out when it comes to trees, you don't look at when the trees are gathered, you look at when the trees are blossoming, which is called chanotah. So what's the cutoff date of the Rosh Hashanah for the trees? The first day in Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Kedivrei Beis Shammai. That's Beis Shammai's opinion. Beis Hillel Oimrim, however, Beis Hillel says b'chamisha asar bay, that Rosh Hashanah for the trees is on chamisha asar, on the 15th day of Shvat. Okay, so those are the 4 Rosh Hashanim that the Gemara now will go and explain ba'arichis all the details of these 4 Rosh Hashanim. So as you see over here, we have a lot of different themes to speak about. It's very colorful, this Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to go through all of the different details. Sagt the Gemara l'melachim. The first Rosh Hashanah the Mishnah said is that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for kings. L'mai hilchasa. For what purpose did Chachamim establish that there should be a Rosh Hashanah for the year of the king? Why not just leave it at whenever he was appointed as a king? Why do you have to make a special Rosh Hashanah to be at Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then automatically when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you change the date of the year of the king when you write it in Tishtaris? Amar Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda says, L'shtaris, this is very useful to when it comes to writing the year into the shtaris, to make sure that you know exactly what the timing of the shtar that was written is. Now the Gemara here brings a Mishnah that it's very important to know the timing of when a shtar was written. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Shtari chayiv hamukdamin, if you have a shtar which is written for a loan, Hamukdamin, if it was predated, psulin, then those shtaris are pasul. V'hameucharin, but if you have a shtar that's post-dated, ksheidin, then those shtaris are going to be kosher. What's the reason for this? What's the difference if it's predated or post-dated? So there's a long Rashi here. I'll try to explain this concept b'kitzer. Point here is there's 2 types of loans. There's a loan that's called a milva al peh, when you borrow money but you do not write it at all in a document. Then the lender could only collect from the properties that are in the borrower's possession. He can't go and collect, let's say the borrower sold off his properties, so the lender cannot go and collect it from those properties that were sold off, which is called lekuchais. There's no lien on the properties that he can go and collect from them. Milva al peh could only collect what's in his possession now. Then there's a milva b'shtar. When you write a document, which is something that everybody knows about, the Gemara says is a koil, everybody is aware of this. So over here, even if the borrower had properties that he sold off, the lender can come to the borrower, and if he sees he has nothing to pay, he can go to the lekuchais and confiscate those properties. Why? Because the buyers of those properties should have known better. They should have made an investigation and seen that there's a lien on this field, that it's owed to somebody. So that's what this Mishnah here is talking about. When you write a shtar that's predated, so what's happening is you're giving the lender the ability to confiscate from buyers of the properties of the borrower unrightfully. Because now it says in the shtar, predated that he borrowed the money from an earlier date. So any buyers from that earlier date going forward is old as a lien on those properties. So anybody that bought from that earlier date, you're going to come and confiscate from them. And really, the loan didn't happen that early. So anybody that bought fields from this borrower from that earlier date, you shouldn't be allowed to confiscate from them. So therefore, predating a shtar, you're giving the rights to the lender, which is too much. So therefore, that shtar is totally pasul, and you can't collect with them from lekuchais. Actually, according to some Rishonim, not only you can't collect from the buyers of the fields, but you can't collect at all this loan. Rashi here says it's a knas. There's a knas that you can't collect from lekuchais. And other Rishonim say the knas goes so far that you can't collect with this loan at all, because you wrote a pre-dated shtar. Whereas if you write a post-dated shtar, so there's no issue. You basically minimize the rights of the lender So if the lender agreed to write a post-dated shtar, and therefore it's going to give him less rights to collect from those people that bought the fields, because it says in the shtar that I only borrow at a later date, okay, that's no problem. So therefore post-dated shtar is not an issue. Okay, so now what's the reason why you have to have a fixed date for when the year of the king is changed, that it's Dafka Chodesh Nisan? So Rashi explains, because sometimes you can run into a problem. What happens if you have a shtar that was not written on the date of the loan? You have a shtar, let's say a borrower comes to Adam, and the borrower tells Adam, write for me a shtar that I owe somebody money. And you're allowed to do such a thing. You don't have to have the lender present when a shtar is written. The borrower himself could go ahead and tell Adam, write a shtar for me that I owe this person money. And that was written when, let's say, Rashi gives the example, it was written on a Chodesh Kislev. Okay? But then those Adam themselves come and tell us later that really the money was already borrowed in Tammuz time. Okay? So you have in the shtar written that we are writing that he owes money on the Chodesh Kislev to the 3rd year of the king. So you're writing the 3rd year of the king. But then later these Adam say that really the money was borrowed in the 3rd year of the king in Tammuz time. The question now becomes, when you say the 3rd year of the king in Tammuz time, what does that mean? Is Tammuz before Kislev or is Tammuz after Kislev? It depends when the king was appointed as a king. If the king was appointed as a king somewhere between Tammuz and the Kislev that follows afterwards, so then the Tammuz that the money was borrowed from had to have been the Tammuz before. But if the king was appointed somewhere between the Kislev and the Tammuz afterwards, so then what happens is this shtar is predated. And then the shtar is not a good shtar. It depends when the king was appointed that will determine if the Tammuz is before Kislev or if the Tammuz is after Kislev. Do I say that the year of the king switches between Tammuz and Kislev? Or no, the year of the king does not switch between Tammuz and Kislev. It switches after Kislev between Kislev and Tammuz. So therefore, if you're not going to have a set date of when the king's year, the year of the king changes, it's going to become confusing to determine if the shtar is predated or it's post-dated. So therefore, the Chachamim established, over here they said that it's going to be the Chodesh Nisan. So therefore, if you have Tammuz and Kislev, if you're starting from the Chodesh Nisan, so Tammuz definitely comes before Kislev. If you're counting from the Chodesh Nisan, so first comes Tammuz and then comes Kislev. So you'll always know exactly the time of when the shtar was written. That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. The thing though is, with this pshat of Rashi, I'm not going to go into the whole arichas here, but just to mention one point, Taisus over here has a problem with this, because Taisus says the confusion that could happen according to Rashi's pshat is only if people are going to make a mistake, in meaning that, or they're going to really forget exactly when the king was appointed. As long as you know the date of when the king was appointed, why is there any room for confusion? You know when the king was appointed, so it's very easy to figure out if the Tammuz where that the money was borrowed is before Kislev or the Tammuz is after Kislev. So Taisus says, so what's going on over here? This is a situation where everybody, the Bezdin and everybody forgot when the king was appointed. So why should there be any confusion? So Taisus has a different shot of what the confusion might be. Taisus says that maybe they could make a mistake of one day. The example Taisus gives is that if the money was borrowed on Beis Nisan, and you make a mistake with one day, you might think that the money was not borrowed on Beis Nisan, but the money was borrowed on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Okay, and you write that the money was borrowed on the 1st year of the king, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. When is that? When is the 1st year of the king, Rosh Chodesh Nisan? So if you make a mistake, again, the mistake is not that you think the money was borrowed. The mistake is not regarding the date of when the money was borrowed. The mistake you could make is the day that the king was appointed. If the king was appointed on Beis Nisan, and you make the mistake and think that the king was appointed on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then you write in the shtar, the money was borrowed the 1st year of the king, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. In your mind, that's a year earlier, because the king was already appointed on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Really, the king was only appointed on Beis Nisan. So that's really a year later. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the next Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the last day of the 1st year of the king. So therefore, there could be a huge difference and of a whole year if you just make a mistake of one day when the king was appointed. So therefore, they established that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the cutoff date, that no matter what, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it always starts again. So you can't make that kind of a mistake. the next year, the Chodesh Nisan, is automatically going to be the next year already for the king. That's Tosfos' pshat. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, in a Braisa we learned, Melech she'omad be'esrim v'tisha ba'adar, a king that was appointed on the 29th day of Adar. Kivin she'gia echad b'nissen, when it comes to the Chodesh Nisan, also leishana. So that we count that one day as a full year, and now we begin counting the second year. V'im lo yamad ela be'echad b'nissen, if the king was appointed on a Chodesh Nisan, ein meinu leishana, so then we don't count for him the next year, ad she'gia Nisan acher, until you come to the next year of Nisan. You have to wait full 12 months. Amamar, so the Gemara now explains this Braisa. The master said in this Braisa, Melech shamad be'esrim v'tisha b'adar, a king that was appointed on the 29th day of Adar, kivin she'gia echad b'nissen, as soon as you come to the next day, the Chodesh Nisan, also leishana. It's a full year. So the Gemara explains what the Braisa is teaching me, what the Chiddush here is. Ha kamash malon. This is what the Braisa is teaching me. The Nisan Rosh Hashanah lemalachim. That Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for kings. V'yayim echad b'shana chashav shana. Just one day of a year is enough, significant enough of a time to be considered like a full year. You might say, yeah, maybe Taka Chodesh Nisan is when I start counting again from new, but one day, just one day. So that's what we're saying. Yes, even one day, even if it's from Chav Tes Adar. Then the Braisa said, Vim lo yamad ela be'echad b'nissen, if the king was appointed on Chodesh Nisan, ein meinu lo shana ad she'yagia Nisan acher. So you don't count for him the next year until he follows the next year Nisan. Fragt the Gemara, Pshita, isn't that obvious? And for the Gemara, Lo tzriche de imnu alei me'adar. It was already decided by the ministers, by the body of people that decide to appoint this king. They already decided on Adar time that they're going to appoint him as king. But he didn't inaugurate him as a king until the Chodesh Nisan. So Mao the Tema, I would think, Nimnu le Tartnishnin. So I would think that when it comes to the first Chodesh Nisan, it should already be the second year because they already decided to appoint him from before. Kamash Malan, that if they actually appointed him as king on a Chodesh Nisan, you have to wait until the following year. Tana Rabbanan, in another Braisa we learned, Meis ba'adar, if the king passed away in Adar. And now v'omad acher tachtov, another king was appointed be'adar, also in the month of Adar. So now, meinin shana lezeh, when you're writing a shtar in this year, so you can write meinin shana lezeh, ulezeh, you can either write the year for the king that passed away, let's say it was the 15th year of that king that passed away, you can write that in the shtar, or lezeh, or you can write the first year from the new king that was appointed then. Meis b'Nissen, if the king passed away in Nisan, or as Rashi says, not only Nisan, but in any of the following months, v'omad acher tachtov, and someone else was appointed instead of this king. So b'Nissen, again, v'omad acher tachtov b'Nissen, and there was another king that was appointed in the month of Nisan. So the same thing, meinin shana lezeh ulezeh. So this year you can write in the shtar either for the king that passed away or for the king that was appointed. The Gemara is soon going to explain the chiddush of each case of these braises, of this braisa here. Meis ba'adar, if a king passed away in the month of Adar, and v'omad acher tachtov b'Nissen, and the next king was only appointed on a Chodesh Nisan or sometime in Nisan, so then meinin rishayna l'rishayn, the previous year goes to the previous king, and v'shniya l'sheni, and the next year, starting from the Chodesh Nisan, goes for the next king that was appointed. This is the braisa. So now the Gemara explains each part of the braisa. Omamar, the master said in this braisa, Meis ba'adar, v'omad acher tachtov ba'adar. The first king passed away in Adar. The next king was also appointed in Adar. Meinin shana lezeh ulezeh. So you count a year for each one of them. Again, I didn't translate that correctly. Meinin shana lezeh ulezeh means you can either count for this king or for the other king in this year. Says the Gemara Pshita. Well, isn't that obvious? You have both two kings that were ruling in this year. Answers the Gemara, Mao de Teime. No, I would think to say that maybe Shata lebetrei loy maninon. Maybe there's a rule that I don't count one year for two different kings. So therefore, once there's a new king in this year, I should only count for the new king, and that's it. Kamash malam. That's why he's saying that no, that you can count for the previous king and you can count for this king. Meis b'Nissen v'omad acher tachtov b'Nissen. If the king died in the month of Nisan and another king was appointed in the month of Nisan, meinin shana lezeh lezeh. You can count for either of these kings. Pshita, this is also obvious. So the Gemara answers, no, Mao the Tema, I would think, ki amrinan yoim echad b'shana chashav shana. When do I say that even one day of a year is counted as a full year, as we mentioned before? That's B'Sayf Shana. Maybe I would say that that's only at the end of a year. Avol b'tchilas shana, when you're beginning a new year, lo yamrinon, maybe I would not say so. Kamash malan, that's the chiddush that he's saying over here, that even if it's just one day of the new year that the old king was alive, even that's enough to count the entire year on the name of this old king, that he was alive for this year only for one day. That's the chiddush in this part of the Braisa. The next case of the Braisa said, Meis ba'adar, if the king passed away in Adar, and the next king was appointed only in Nisan, the previous year is counted for the previous king, and the next year is counted for the next king that was appointed. Pshita, this is also obvious. So the Gemara explains, the Gemara answers, similar to what we said before, but the Gemara adds a detail here. The chiddush here is the imnu alei me Adar, that the new king that was appointed in Nisan, they already had decided to appoint him from the month of Adar, and now the Gemara says another point. And not only that, umelech ben melech. This is a king that's a son of the previous king, so there's nothing to argue about. It's obvious that he's going to be appointed. Rashi says the Gemara adds this because the previous chiddush we already said before. So he's going to inherit the kingdom for sure. So mao de teime, I would think to say nimnu le tartan shnin, that since it's so short that he's going to be appointed, so he should already be considered to be like the king from other time. And then when it comes Nisan, it should be already like a second year. Kamash Malan, that's the chiddush, that since he wasn't actually appointed as king until Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we don't count it until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Okay, now the Gemara comes actually to explain the basis of all of this. From where do I know Bechlal that Rosh Hashanah L'Malachim starts from Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Rabbi Yochanan said, Minayin L'Malachim She'emayna L'Mela Min Nisan. How do we know when it comes to the Yiddish kings? So we count their years from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Shenamar, because there's a pasuk that says as follows: Vayihi b'shmoinim shana va'arba mei shana l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. It was 480 years to when Yidden left from Mitzrayim. B'shana haravias, in the 4th year, b'chodesh Ziv, in the month of Ziv, which is Iyar, hu ha'chodesh hasheni, the 2nd month of the year, starting from Nisan, which is the month of Iyar, l'melech Shloimeh al Yisrael, to the king of Shloimeh HaMelech ruling on the Yidden. So as Rashi says, when it says in the pasuk here, B'shana Haravias, the 4th year, it means the 4th year of Shloimeh HaMelech ruling over the Yidden. The pasuk is sort of written out of order, but that's how you're supposed to read it. So, in the pasuk, when it gives the date here, it gives the date of the Yidden leaving Mitzrayim, and it also gives the date of the year of Shloimeh HaMelech's kingdom. So therefore we compare the two. Makish Malchus Shloimeh liYitzias Mitzrayim. We compare the Melucha of Shloimeh HaMelech to the Yidden going out of Mitzrayim. Ma Yitzias Mitzrayim, just like Yidden left Mitzrayim in Nisan, that was in the month of Nisan, Af Malchus Shloimeh min Nisan. So too the Melucha of Shloimeh HaMelech, when you count the 4th year of Shloimeh HaMelech, when do you count that? From Nisan. But the Gemara doesn't accept this answer. The Gemara says, wait a minute, V'yitzias Mitzrayim gufa minolon de min Nisan maninon. When it comes to Yitzias Mitzrayim, and we're counting years, how many years passed from when Yidden left Mitzrayim, how do you know you count that from Nisan? In other words, obviously Yitzias Mitzrayim actually happened in Nisan, but maybe when we count the years, maybe when it comes to Tishrei, which is the new year from Brias Ha'olam, the main Rosh Hashanah of the year, maybe then I start counting a 2nd year. I don't count a 2nd year from the following Nisan. Dilme mit Tishrei menina, maybe we count from Tishrei. So the Gemara says, no, lo yisal kedaitach, that can't be. When it comes to Yitzias Mitzrayim, we count the years of Yitzias Mitzrayim from Nisan, not from Tishrei. And the Gemara brings psukim for this. There's a pasuk where it says, regarding Aaron HaKohen passing away, Vayal Aaron HaKohen el Hoyer HaHor, Aaron HaKohen went up to Hoyer HaHor, al pi Hashem, Vayom Hashem, and he passed away there. B'shnas ha'arbayim l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, the 40th year of Yidden leaving Mitzrayim, b'chodesh ha'chamishi b'echad l'chodesh, in the beginning of the 5th month, which is in a chodesh of. That's one pasuk. So here it says it was the 40th year of the Yidden leaving Mitzrayim. Then it says in the beginning of Chumash Dvarim, Vayihi bar bayim shana, and it was in the 40th year when Yidden left Mitzrayim. Ba'ashtei asa chodesh b'echad l'chodesh, in the 11th month, and the 1st day of the month, Dibbe Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden. So over here it also says it was the 40th year. So now the Gemara says, let's think about this. Midekoi ba'ov, when it wasn't the month of Av, v'kari leish nasar bayim. And the pasuk refers to it as the 40th year of Yidden leaving Mitzrayim. And then v'koi b'shvat, when it came to the 11th month of the year, when Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Yidden in the month of Shvat, and v'kari leish nasar bayim, it also refers to it as the 40th year. Miklal, the Rosh Hashanah, lav tishreihu. So I see that the Rosh Hashanah, in other words, when we count from Yetzias Mitzrayim, Tishrei does not change the count of the year. If it would, so it should have said that when Moshe spoke to Yidden, it was the 41st year of when they left Mitzrayim. So the fact that we don't change that, so we see that we counted from Nisan. So from Av to Shvat, there was no Nisan in between yet. So the Gemara continues and asks on this, Bishloime heyach, I understand the first pasuk that you quoted by Aaron HaKohen passing away, Mefarish Yetzias Mitzrayim. There it clearly says, when it says 40 years, it's referring to 40 years from when Yetzias Mitzrayim happened. But Elahai, this pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden on the 40th year. Mimaydi Yetzias Mitzrayim. How do you know when he says the 40th year means the 40th year of Yetzias Mitzrayim? It doesn't say it in the pasuk. Dilme la'akamas Mishkan. Maybe it refers to the 40th year of when the Mishkan was put up, which was 1 year later. It was the second year when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, and that's why it's called the 40th year. It's still the 40th year. So the Gemara answers, no, over here the 40th year does not mean the Mishkan. Kid'amar Rav Papa, similar to what Rav Papa says later, Shnas Esrim l'Gezeira Shava. When the Torah uses the same term, Esrim and Esrim, we compared it to it as Gezeira Shava. So Hachanami here as well, Shnas Arbayim l'Gezeira Shava. The Torah uses the term Arbayim and Arbayim. We compared it to Ma'kan Yetzias Mitzrayim, just like by Aaron HaKohen, it clearly says Yetzias Mitzrayim, Afkan Yetzias Mitzrayim. So too when Moshe speaks to the Yidden, it's referring to Yetzias Mitzrayim. No, but the Gemara now has another question. Umimai, but how do you know the Maaseh of Kodim? How do you know that the story of Aaron HaKohen passing away in the month of Av is before Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to the Yidden? Dilme Maaseh the Shvat Kodim. Maybe the story of Shvat came before. How do you know we're talking about the Shvat that's following Chodesh Av? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we're talking about Av after Shvat. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to the Yidden first. So there was no Tishrei between the Av and the Shvat because we're talking about the Shvat that was before Av. So the Gemara says, no, that also can't be. Moshe Rabbeinu did not speak to the Yidden before Aaron HaKohen passed away. Because the pasuk says, Acharei hakoisai es sichain, that when Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Yidden, he speaks to them after they had killed Sichain. And v'chinoch nafshi da'arein, when Aaron HaKohen passed away, akati avasichain kayim. Sichain was still alive. They did not kill Sichain yet. And the Gemara brings the source for this. Let's just finish this inyan over here. It goes a little bit down into the Yamud. Tichsev, because the pasuk says, what happened when Aaron HaKohen passes away? Vayishma Knani melech Harod. The Knani, the king of Arad, heard that Aaron HaKohen passed away. Mashmu Shama, what did he hear? Shama Shemei Saran. He heard that Aaron HaKohen passed away. V'nistalko Anani Kovid, and the Anani HaKovid that was surrounding the Yidden was removed. U'kesavar, and he thought, Nitna Reshos Lihilachem B'Yisrael. Permission was given to go and fight with the Yidden. And he went to attack the Yidden. And V'haina D'chsev, when Aaron HaKohen passes away, the pasuk says, V'yiru kol ha'eda ki gova ha'aren. So the simple pshat is, the Yidden saw that Aaron HaKohen passed away. But Rabbi says, Al tikri vayiru, don't read the pasuk as they saw, ela vayira'u, and they became afraid. And then you have to read the pasuk when it says, sorry, you're right, I'm sorry about that. Vayiro, they were seen, exactly. Instead of vayiro and they saw, but vayiro means and they were exposed, and they were seen. And now the Gemara explains, if you translate the word vayero and they were seen, you also have to translate the word ki differently. If you read, let's read the pasuk. When you read it, vayiru kolei da ki gava, what's the translation of ki? And they saw that Aaron passed away. But if you translate the pasuk vayerau and they were exposed, then you have to read it vayero kolei and they were exposed ki because gava Aaron. Not that, but because. So the Gemara here brings the source for this. Kid Reish Lakish, as Reish Lakish says, the Amar Reish Lakish, ki mishamish bedalad l'shainis. The word ki could be translated in 4 different ways. It could be if, dilme, maybe, ella, but, daha, because. So over here, you translate the word ki as because. Okay, so now what's the point that the Gemara is saying over here? that only when Aaron HaKohen passed away did Melech Kanani come to fight with the Yidden, and then they killed Melech Kanani. But before that, he was still alive. So therefore we know that Aaron HaKohen passed away before Moshe Rabbeinu came to speak to the Yidden, and it says that they already killed Sichain. But the Gemara asks on this, but wait a minute, it's Midami, Hasam Kenan, Hacha Sichain. When Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Yidden, it says that Sichain was already killed. When Aaron HaKohen passes away, it says that Canaan saw that the Yidden were exposed. Canaan and Sichain are not the same person. It doesn't seem like they're the same person. So the Gemara answers, no, they are. Tane, hu Sichain, hu Arad, hu Canaan. These three names are the same individual. Sichain, Arad, and Canaan. And the Gemara explains why. Sichain means Shedoime l'sayach b'midbar. Sichain just means, it's a nickname because he's similar to this horse that runs in the desert. Canaan, Al Shem Al Chusay, the name Canaan was the actual name of his kingdom. Umar Shmai, and what was his name? Arad. His name was Arad Shmai. That was his name. Or Ikadamri, there's another version. Arad means Shedoime la'araid. He's similar to this wild donkey, I think it is, that runs around in a desert, Bamidbar. And Canaan, Al Shem Al Chusay, the name Canaan goes in his kingdom. Umar Shmai, Sichain Shmai. His name is Sichain. So the point is that Canaan and Sichain is the same individual. So therefore we have the raya over here that we count Yitzias Mitzrayim from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and we compare the same thing to the Melucha of Shloimeh, that we count the Malchus of Shloimeh from Rosh Chodesh Nisan.